Hey, I'm Wes the Explosion, and I've done lists of all my favorite bosses from each of the Mega Man platformers, so why not Battle Network 2? Well, when it comes to that series, some get reused quite often, which means my list might have a good bit of repetition too. Plus, if I can make a confession, there's still a few secret fights I haven't done in Battle Network, so my knowledge is incomplete. So while I might try to pull a list by game later, right now it might just be wiser to do a top 10 Navi countdown instead. Plus, doing it that way, it'll be easier to justify pulling from other sources like the anime as well, which a few people have questioned in the past when I picked a boss because I love their sparkling personality. Not that that might not still be a factor when I do a follow-up, but ignore that and let's just move on right to number 10. Charge Man. Why is a train a Navi? I don't know, but there's something whimsical about a Thomas the Tank Engine character, but with sharper edges, a less human face, and two silly whittle arms showing up here. He's one of the Navis you can befriend and control in Battle Network 6, and unlike most of those you recruit, which involve just running around the net as them, performing pretty banal tasks, with Charge Man you get an actual minigame, which is a nice change of pace late in the game. And hey, since you're able to use him, guess what his charge attack is? Running you over while dragging a few extra cars behind him for additional damage, because in a fight, you can never be too sure. He's a very fun character and a nice guy to boot, him actually helping you out in the story during a contest where it would really be better for him if he just let you get deleted. All this extends to his net-up as well, Al Ferry, who, while a little disappointed at his loss, still immediately invites Lan to take his class all about the joys of trains. While they might not be my thing, I appreciate anyone who has a hyperfixation and isn't shy about it. While a lot of people might think it's not the most socially acceptable, if you put your dumb hobby out there and people don't respect it, they're the embarrassing ones in my opinion. Both Al and Charge Man make a very fun pair that, honestly, was a delightful surprise when I first encountered them. I don't think I was expecting Charge Man to get an adaptation that late in the series, and I definitely wasn't expecting him to look like that if he did. My guess would have been more in line with the Charge Cross he gives Mega Man. At 9, it's Elect Man. I like his design, especially the transformers on his back, his bulky metal gloves, and his weird dragon shield chest piece. Plus, his gray skin, red eyes, and lightning bolt tears are really striking. In addition to that, I like how expressionless he looks in the games and how he floats about. His stoicism is balanced out by how he acts in Battle Network 6. Him showing a lot of consideration for his net-up, Mrs. Zap, swallowing his pride in working with Lan and Mega Man despite his grudge, and not mentioning who they are and how they were the ones to get her husband arrested. Not that it matters, she already knows, Sly Fox. His initial fight also left an impression on me, him starting out invincible and Lan needing to put himself in harm's way to eliminate his advantage. While it's not the only scenario to show the connection between the physical and net worlds, I think it showed off the pair's trust and teamwork really well. And of course the real reason he's here, sweet Christmas, I love Elect Cross in 6. It charges fast and hits everything in the row in front of you. Well, I'm not sure if it's a meta pick, and really, most of the crosses are busted in that game. With me typically defaulting to this form and stacking Buster Pluses on it, I obliterated that game, even in scenarios where I should have been at a disadvantage. Fighting Dive Man? He's done with the mere sneeze. Element Man switched to his wood form? I don't care, he's still dead before he can hit me. Sometimes you want a challenge, sometimes you want to be a god. Skull Man, my number 8, just looks really cool, doesn't he? With how lanky his body is and how long his skull extends, along with his hunched back, he's a very cartoony and kinda creepy looking skeleton. He's very stylish. And with the warmer colors thrown in for his limbs, he's not just a simple black and white. In battle, he breathes a trail of blue fire from his mouth, which adds to his otherworldly appearance, and he also tosses his arm around, them spinning and chasing you down, which can be a little unsettling. Plus, with this attack, I have a pretty distinct memory of him tilting his head as he called out, "Boo Stalker," in one version of the anime. Probably that oddball dub I talked about a few weeks ago. His skull crush though is what really gets me. Him tossing his head up off the screen, only for it to come crashing down several times bigger on your side of the field. Not too many characters can get away with the whole self-decapitation thing. He was also my preferred Navi chip in the original Battle Network title. Him doing this attack but for you now to deal a ton of damage that, due to the time freeze you typically get with these chips, is pretty much undodgeable, making all but the beefiest bosses easy pickings. Who needs Buster Max when you have Skull Man? Unfortunately, you don't get too much on him as a character, him showing up just as a side boss, with little to no dialogue in game, and with the anime, him being very mysterious, then a helpful mentor and teammate once you get to be on a first name basis. His net-op Miyu always seems to get more attention, though she's a goth girl, so I suppose I'll allow it. So yeah, while I wish I could say more, it's largely an aesthetic thing that makes me like him so much. A bit mechanics as well. I really love the creepy but not quite scary look, and with how it's adapted into the Battle Network style is just wonderful. Nightman is a sweet boy who we must cherish, which is why he's number 7. I have a great love for knights, which is why I have such a fondness for the Shovel Knight series, Fire Emblem, Gardevoir, and come to think of it, I also really like Code Geass, so he has a natural advantage here. Our big man certainly exemplifies the post, him being chivalrous and loyal. When you first face him in BN2, you get the distinct impression that he feels that what he's doing is wrong, but due to his steadfast duty to both his country and Netop, Princess Pride, he still stands in opposition to Lan and Mega Man, it likely coming as a relief when you defeat him. While I know and like how the anime made the pair just good guys, I do like the extra nuance they have in the games, them not being straight up evil, but still doing some pretty nasty things due to the heavy responsibilities that have been placed on their shoulders. Maybe I'd be a little more judgmental had they actually succeeded, but we get the best of both worlds, them returning as the first pair you recruit in Team Colonel. They seem to be in a much better spot in this entry, Pride no longer having the bags under her eyes as she did previously, and them helping you out first to make amends, then out of largely a sense of altruism for the rest of the game and being an assuring presence throughout. And Nightman's just a great guy! He shows respect for his teammates even when they make questionable decisions, and will even acknowledge the good character points of his enemies. He's such a sweetie that I'd say he needs to be protected if that wasn't his job, him dashing in to block a hit for allies if he's close enough on the board. Unlike Magnet Man, who you need to pay for his services. Why must you be such a tsundere? In Combat 2 though, he's really interesting. His Night Crush charge attack hits all around him, which is pretty limited. Honestly, when I first played Battle Network 5, I thought that he was the weak link, given how close you needed to be to hit anything. Yet replaying it, with a lot more experience under my belt, it helped me realize how he excels in situations that are bad for most other characters, such as spaces that see you surrounded on both sides. And his special is called Royal Wrecking Ball, which is really fun to say. He really is just the best. At 6, it's Colonel.EXE, and his appearance blew my frickin' mind. At the time, the only other X character to show up in Battle Network was Zero, and that was in a spin-off. Plus it's Zero, I mean, come on, if they're gonna make an exception for anyone, of course it'd be him. And funnily enough, at the time I picked up BN5, I actually hadn't played X4, Double Team dropping in 2004, while Nintendo household me wouldn't get the X collection on GameCube until 2006. I'd read plot summaries though, and X4 sounded really epic, so seeing this black-clad version of a character that I'd only heard about, made him take on an almost mythic quality in my mind. This was the Colonel, one of the top dogs of Repliforce whose death caused deep scars for the main characters, especially Zero, and now he's gotten a new lease on life as a Navi in another timeline? That's so stinking cool! I also really liked this game, Team Colonel finding me during a particularly rough point in my life, and me latching onto it much more than I did Team Proto Man. I loved getting the chance to play as other Navis and trying to figure out what Colonel and Barrel's deal was, though the game made it clear that they were badasses. And they were Netopians, so America! They also used them to kinda get the plot back on track, the new group Nebula not having quite the same impact as WWW or Gospel, but his game and his role specifically tie everything back together for the finale. I won't say more than that though. In combat, his screen divide was really interesting. It's a little weird to try and explain, but pretty much he hits the closest enemy directly in front of him, and it can also catch enemies back diagonally from his main target. Hopefully that's not too confusing, but it's the sort of thing that an inexperienced player can make work, since despite it being a sword, it doesn't seem to have a limited range, but at high level, you can use it to take out multiple foes at once. Beyond nostalgia, mystique, and mechanics though, I just liked him as a team leader, him being stern and stoic, but showing a lot of concern for others, especially Mega Man, in rare instances of vulnerability. He's the sort of person you'd want in charge of your group, and I just generally loved my time with Team Colonel, which he was the obvious face of. Tomahawkman.EXE is why I love the original Tomahawk Man so much. Also 5. While the Robot Master looks a bit grizzled and mean, the Navi looks a bit younger and seems to work the sci-fi elements into his armor a bit better, while also looking like a more fun guy with a sense of humor and a cockiness to him. I like how they blend the Native American elements with his armory bits, and I find his color scheme very pleasant, with the striking white feathers with warm tips and a shade of blue that I don't see very often. And in combat, he just felt really busted when I first played as him whipping out tomahawks that boomeranged, letting you rip through enemies quick, and his double soul having the same range as a life sword, you also recovering health over time on grass panels in either case. You even recruit him in the game specifically because of his ability to kill a bunch of guys, really fast, in just a few blows, so he's meant to be made of murder. I was in love with the character enough that I would say, tomahawk, to the face, in place of kick your ass, and even wanted to cosplay him, which none of my friends at the time were helpful enough to warn me against doing due to me not having the complexion for it. Thank God I never managed to put that costume together. He's another Netopian, so it's more American representation, and I feel like they try to give the guy some respect. His equivalent on Team Proto Man, Napalm Man, committing a crime for pretty dumb and petty reasons, whereas Tomahawk Man and his NetOp Dingo do so more with a sense of honor, fighting back against a corporation that wronged their tribe. I also like how Dingo is the only one on the team that's really all that close to Lan in age, making him and Tomahawk Man feel more like peers than the rest of the characters. I'm really looking forward to how they interact when I get around to watching the stream anime. When it comes to Battle Network 6, I focus pretty heavily on Cybeast Gregar, but the only thing that made me rethink my choice of version was Tomahawk Man waiting in the wings on the other cartridge. At 4, it's Needle Man. I just kinda love his whole vibe. He manages to look pretty inhuman while still staying humanoid, from his four-fingered, claw machine hands, his head just being yet another one of his massive spikes, his yellow eyes and teeth, and his chest looking more like a gardening attachment than an actual body part. He also kinda shuffles around all jerky-like in network transmission, and he even has a one-piece laugh. I wish I did the whole sha 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 when I thought something was amusing. Instead, my chuckle is pretty unremarkable in my opinion. And while I have no idea what he calls out when I summon him with his Navi chip since I don't speak Japanese, I like to think it sounds like, "See, that looks lovely!" I also like how distinct they make him from the original Needleman, him no longer having an airman type body and being a lot lankier, yet you can tell he's the same dude just from his moveset, him keeping the needle cannon and needle hammer. It's a good mix of old and new. While I'd say it's a waste that he's limited to just a spin-off game that nobody played, the anime actually makes frequent use of him being the Navi of one of the main antagonists in Access, Miss Yuriko. While a lot of the characters feel like they have pretty generic voices, he has an odd way of talking, which the wiki claims is a Yakuza dialect. Didn't know that was a thing, but thinking on it, yeah, that does match up with similar characters and does work with his role in the series. I learned something. Neat. I also love a good sadistic character, which he kinda comes across as. He also has a cross-fusion form which, while this isn't my kink, I'm also not going to deny that I'm checking out Miss Yuriko at least a little bit. Sexy Needle Man is a phrase that I thought I'd never use. I need to get further into the anime. And number 3 is going to be a bit spoiler heavy, more so than what we've already covered, so if you haven't played Battle Network 6 but are planning on it, maybe skip ahead to 2. If you're curious, you can always come back later, or when you get to the big reveal in that game, you can probably just assume that was who I picked. Give you an extra second, and Iris. I really love the X games, and seeing the few exceptions Battle Network makes for that series is always a delight, them only including 4 characters from X, unless I'm forgetting someone. Not only that, but from these games, Iris is a particular favorite of mine, and the way she's included here was something really special. At first, she shows up and you have no clue who she is, but she seems important enough to get you interested. Then you get the name drop and you have to question what's going on since all the robots are reimagined as Navis here, yet she appears to be human, her not just appearing in the physical world, but also wearing normal clothes as opposed to any bodysuit or crazy armor. What happened to the world where only Reploids exist? Of course, they drop a lot of hints about what's really going on, them being prominent enough that you can pick up on the likely situation while not beating you over the head with it enough that you can still get to the big reveal completely in the dark if you're not paying attention, which I think is a really nice balance. And then bam, the full naked truth is before you, and the entire game's plot clicks into place. In addition to that roller coaster ride, I also really love how obvious it is that the people writing the scenario actually understood and loved X4, both Iris and Colonel having a similar backstory and connection to what they did in that game, and them not just borrowing the name and basic designs to create completely new characters just to write off of their previous popularity. In fact, they might have done too good of a job with this since I became extremely depressed after clearing the game. We can talk about that some other time though. And while the way she expressed both her kindness and desire for peace are different here, both showed through, and even if she wasn't an X4 reference, she'd still be a favorite of mine just from all the time she saves you in-game and how much her and Lan look out for each other. So between the mystery surrounding her, all the X4 homages, and her endearing personality, she really left an impression on me and is an easy favorite. And her being cute as a button doesn't hurt either. And now we come to the hardest part of any ranked list, having to choose between your two favorites. This is something I wish I could avoid, but after giving it a fair bit of thought, number 2, just shy of 1, is Cutman. I love him largely because I love the original Robot Master. Since this isn't a classic video, I'll keep this brief, but I was big into the Ruby Spears cartoon. Despite not being fond of the color orange, it goes remarkably well with the rest of his white. I'm a fan of boomerangs as weapons, and think it's silly how he's a lumberjack, yet instead of an axe, he gets a pair of scissors he can huck around. When it comes to EXE, he just feels like Cutman but more. The extra grays thrown into his design really pulling the look together, and him being somehow more serious and silly at the same time. Him having a grim expression in Deadly Task, yet him keeping his fingers in a scissor pose, and wearing a large C on his chest, like those people who write their names on their underpants so that they don't forget it. I'm not sure how they managed to strike such a perfect balance with him, but it's genius. Speaking of his job, they made him an assassin in this one, meant to go in and clean up after Shadow Man's strikes, wiping out any survivors. He himself seems to be a bit of a ninja, sneaking around in the space between dimensions, or maybe netcoding would be more accurate, and his open and closed fingers could be a ninja hand sign just as easily as him making his favorite rock paper scissor pose, and most likely it's supposed to be kinda both. On top of that, Gospel's probably my favorite villain group from the games, though Cutman's presence probably helps with that significantly. I think the only thing really holding him back in my mind is how brief his appearance is. In the chapter he appears in, he's not even the main threat, he just shows up at the end as a boss to, like I said, finish things up. Once you delete him, that's pretty much it outside of finding his ghost data and fighting him again in the endgame rematch with just a single word of dialogue from the guy. The anime does much the same thing, him just kinda popping in, getting one-shotted after a matter of minutes, and then just kinda staying dead. It's a little better in this case though, since we get a group of characters called the Cutman Brothers, who vow to avenge him, but that's not Cutman proper, just a group of 5 comedy relief characters, and while I do like them, it's still just not the same. As prominent as they made every other original Mega Man's Navi equivalent, I kinda feel like my boy got gypped. So if number 1 isn't Cutman, then of course it's Shadow Man. A little worried I might have given it away with my last pick, but it's kinda hard to talk about Cut without mentioning Shadow, though sadly the reverse isn't so true. I love ninjas, and I've talked at length about how cool I think his design is, looking like he's just wearing a typical shinobi garb from afar, but a closer look has his gear appearing much more solid and metallic. It's a great combination of something rustic and out of a fantasy, and the sci-fi. And the way he's categorized in games is so cool. Him first appearing as a secret boss in a post-game area, then a network transmission just popping in to go around with you before just vanishing since he already finished his job, because he's too strong for you to defeat, to when you actually need to fight him, you requiring 2 Deus Ex Machinas just to put you on even ground. When he shows back up in 5 as an ally, and late game everyone else is going crazy due to evil radio waves, he's the only one unaffected. Him just rematching under the guise of being brainwashed so that you can have one last good, no holding back fight. Because he's a ninja, no one controls him, he just rents out his services. As much as I love chivalry and fighting for a cause, I also appreciate characters that are straight up mercenaries, since that makes them a bit more of a wild card, since whether they're an enemy or an ally could all come down to a paycheck. In a way, that unpredictability kinda makes them scarier. He seems to have quite an operation going too, him having legions of ninja under him, as well as Cutman and Killerman allegedly being his apprentice, though I would have expected that guy to be stronger if that's the case. He's gotta be lying, right? And going back to 5, in combat he has air shoes, which is super helpful when things like missing panels can leave you a sitting duck, and for his charge attack, he leaps into the air and hurls a shuriken at the enemy. Sometimes, not having to aim is nice, and I used to have fun seeing if I could time the throw so that the incoming attacks would pass right under me, rather than just dodging normally. On the field, he can run over dark panels, letting him pull off some harebrained strategies, and cheese some maps, which I'm all about. His Navi chip is usually pretty good, him and his duplicates throwing a trio of shuriken, which, when combined with an attack plus, can rack up damage quick. And in some situations, he even has an insta-kill with his Muramasa, the coolest of all katana, which is impressive even if it is unfair. Between how often he shows up, combined with how he's portrayed, it's obvious that he was a favorite of the developers as well, so while making him my top pick might seem basic, I'd argue that liking a character that was created to be awesome is just good design. Well, that's my list. Hopefully it wasn't too predictable, though I feel like my love for X4 and my top 2 are pretty well known. Then again, maybe it's your first time visiting the channel, in which case, welcome, and maybe consider subscribing if you enjoyed the video. Oh, and if it feels like 1 or 2 groups got the majority of the spots on my list, never you mind, it's just your imagination. Anyway, please feel free to let me know your own favorite Netnavis. in as much or as little detail as you like, and thanks as always for watching. For everlasting peace.